switch on your cameras. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. It is being conducted via Zoom tonight pursuant to section 18.3 of the COVID Emergency Act and following the advice from staff and consultation with elected members. So it is a bit back to the future with everyone online. So if I can just remind everyone that to use the raise hand function if you want to speak to an item, and then I can recognise you before you speak. So other than that, most of our procedures are the same. I will though just call out if there's any objections to some of the more pedestrian items like the minutes, and if I don't hear any voices, I'll just declare that carried, and then when we need to vote, I'll do a complete round of a roll call of elected members to make sure we've got your vote correct. So I think all elected members are present. If I'm, no, maybe I can't see Councillor Dutta or Councillor Sherlock, so I'm not sure whether they're apologies, but they're not here right at the moment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We will follow that up from an administrative perspective. I understand they're not apologies this evening, so we might have some technical issues.
Yeah, okay. Good. So to start with, acknowledgement to country in recognition of the deep history and culture of this place, particularly on Reconciliation Week, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which the City of Hobart was built, and I'd like to acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal community, the Palawa people of Tasmania, and acknowledge again on this special week of reconciliation their leadership in promoting and practicing their culture and maintaining their identity and their rights, their traditional rights. And I'd like to recognise the value of continuing Aboriginal knowledge and cultural practice and pay my respects to elders past and present. So the confirmation of the minutes, would someone like to raise their hand just to practice the raised hand function? Oh, thanks Alderman Barakis, but I also just, if people could use the normal, yeah, you've done it now, the one on screen. So that's moved by Alderman Barakis. I need a seconder. Councillor Sherlock, any dissent to the minutes?
Dissent, Lord Mayor.
Was that Alderman Zuko?
Yeah, I'm dissenting to the minutes.
Ah, okay. All right. Transfer of agenda items. Is there any transfer of agenda items?
Yes, Lord Mayor. I'd like to transfer item 15 to committee, please.
To the committee? That's different. I think that's a deferral.
No, Lord Mayor. If you look at the resolution to council, it actually said that an urgent report be prepared to council via the appropriate committee within a month. So it shouldn't be at council.
Okay, look, that's a procedural deferral motion, not a transfer of agenda item. So what I'm going to propose, Alderman Zuko, is that we deal with it as a deferral motion when we get
I'll move a deferral motion to committee then, Lord Mayor.
You can when we get to that.
Lord Mayor, well, I'll ask this question.
No, Alderman Zuko, I've made my ruling.
That's fine. This is a different matter, Lord Mayor. I'm actually seeking that item 15 be dealt with prior to item 9, to be dealt with as item 8.5.
Okay, so so that's a motion to transfer the item, moved by Alderman Zuko. Is that seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor?
No, Lord Mayor, I just want to speak to that.
To the item. Okay, so that was seconded by, I don't have a seconder at this point. Alderman Briscoe, if you could use your raised hand function, that would be good. But if you If you don't, that's all right. I saw your hand, that's fine, but if, keep an eye out for it. Okay, so that's been moved by Alderman Zuko, second by Alderman Briscoe. Do we have any comments on or any discussion on that transfer of agenda item?
Well, yes, Lord Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, Alderman, Deputy Lord Mayor.
It's quite customary to deal with this after the planning matters. So I would suggest that we consider it after item 9.
Lord Mayor, I've moved the motion. It's been seconded, so it's up for
I understand, Alderman Zuko, but I'm just
Thank
seeking
you.
comments on it. Any further discussion on the proposal? Councillor Dutta, if you wouldn't mind using your hands up function too, but I can see your hand, that's fine.
Thank you. Lord Mayor, I would support the comments made by the Deputy. I think it has been a normal practice that we do that, and I would support the comments made.
Okay. Councillor Coates.
Oh, look, thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, reading between the lines, and it seems like the intent here is because there may be a move to send it to committee. I mean, I would suggest that we could probably deal with it as a group. If it does go to committee, it's all done, and no doubt the people connecting today to watch it means they don't need to wait for all the planning committee items, of which there's quite a few. So, look, I think in the interest of community service and just being more handy for the community, that would seem to me to be the better option.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, look, I think we can deal with it very straightforwardly. It either gets accepted if we move the motion in a moment, you move the motion or put the motion. I think the reasons that Alderman Zuko and also Councillor Coates have mentioned are quite persuasive. We are in the hands of the council, are in the hands of itself in terms of procedure, so it's not bound by legislation in terms of changing emotions when we hear motions or put motions. So I don't think Councillor Dutta has been around as long as Alderman Briscoe and Alderman Zuko would realise that we do move agenda items around quite regularly. Thank you.
Alderman Thomas.
Yes, thanks, Lord Mayor. Two things. First of all, I've got no problems with it moving forward, but I've also would like, if it is, when it is opened up, I'd like the first thing to come from the Chief Executive to confirm that the actual resolution on this is as per Alderman Zuko. I've got no reason to disbelieve that. It was to go to committee before it came to council, in which case it would seem we have no alternative, but I'll leave that till we get to the item itself.
Lord Mayor, I can just answer Alderman Thomas there. We just
no, that's fine, Alderman Zuko.
Just for a point of clarification,
no,
the
we
minutes,
don't have points of clarification like that. Thanks, Alderman Zuko.
Lord Mayor, the minutes were just approved. They're on the minutes. Everyone just check your own minutes.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's no further discussion on the transfer of the agenda item, the proposal is to transfer it to item 8. Is that correct? So before the planning items. Oh, sorry. Item 9 before the planning items. So we've already got an item 8. So I'll put that. Well, I think I'll probably need to get a vote on that. So would I'll just go around and call it. So Deputy Lord Mayor, how would you like to vote for the transfer, that is, to item 8? Item 9, sorry.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zuko.
For Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
For, Chair.
Alderman Sexton.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Yes, Alderman Barakis.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
Against.
Councillor Fox.
For.
Councillor Sherlock.
For.
Councillor Coates.
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote for. So that will be now item number 8. Okie doke. So any other transfer of agenda items?
Well, Lord Mayor, if we're transferring item, was that item 14 or 15?
It was item 15.
Perhaps we should transfer item 14 as well. And have them have
Second that, Lord Mayor.
Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Alderman Zuko. So is there any discussion on moving that? No. So that will be in the same order as the previous matters, as it's previously listed. Do you want that one as before the 15?
Lord Mayor, just want to clarify, the first one was transferred first, so that would be dealt with first. Second one will be dealt with after that, because they were transferred after.
I'll just seek the advice of the CEO whether they've got a view on that in terms of order of how they were in the agenda now that they're both coming forward.
That's correct, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Sorry, just whichever one is transferred first. Yeah.
That is correct, Lord
Correct.
Mayor.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Alderman Zuko. I'm asking the CEO for advice.
I'd just like to know what's correct. What is going to be dealt with first?
So we're moving that the item 14 is the second item to be transferred, and that's being transferred to after item 15, which is now.
Okay, thank you.
It's already been transferred.
Thank you. Clarification.
Okie doke. So that's been moved. Would anyone like to speak on that matter? No hands up. So I'll put that. All those, oh, sorry. Is there any dissent to moving that item? There's no dissent. So that one item has been moved unanimously. Okie doke. So we'll now move on to communications from the chair. The only thing I wanted to mention was just recognition of our City of Hobart staff that received a National Planning Institute Award for the project that they undertook during 2020-2021. I think it was a 2-year period, which was the bus shelter design competition. As you know, that generated a lot of interest from around the world. Many submissions made, and the public was also involved in a people's choice, as well as an expert panel chose the winning design. So it was a very good process and an innovative process that led to a very good, clever design, and the staff have been recognised and for that item, for that work. So congratulations to the staff and everyone else who was involved in that national award. Item 4 is notification of council workshops. It is the there was one on the draft budget estimates on the 28th of May, and there were 8 elected members in attendance. Item 5 is public question time. Have we got any? I think the staff have made provision for this. Are there any public questions?
Not to my knowledge, Lord Mayor, but I will just ask our councillor support function, just in case there had been some received later today. Mr. Jackson.
Through you, Lord Mayor, no, we haven't received any.
Okay.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Are there any petitions?
There are nil petitions, Lord Mayor.
Okay. So that moves on to consideration of supplementary items. I don't think there were any. There are any? Just checking with CEO.
That's correct, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Item 8 is indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest. Are there any members who wish to indicate an interest in any items on the open agenda? Councillor Sherlock?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I think that now becomes items 9 and 10, to my understanding. Is that correct? Previously 14 and 15.
Okay. Yes, 9 and 10.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you.
Councillor Sherlock. Any other? No, no other. Okay, well that brings us to item 14, which I think we have a motion before us that was circulated by the Deputy Lord Mayor. And that's been seconded by. Oh no, sorry, Councillor Sherlock, you need to leave now.
Yeah,
sorry.
thank you. That's okay. Thanks.
Lord Mayor, I actually believe that item 15 should be held first. It was deferred first. I'm sorry, that is process. But I'm accepting your ruling if you want to go down that track, because
item 15 is now item 8.
Okay, thank you. I'm totally confused.
So item 15 is the response to the
Thank you, Lord
petitions. Is that what you were talking about?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I just like to move that as a deferral motion, Lord Mayor, on the basis that if the minutes of the meeting in respect of when this was determined, it clearly said that an urgent report be prepared for council via the appropriate committee within a month. This hasn't been to the appropriate committee, and I believe that this matter should have proper debate for democracy. I don't believe that having it directly on the council agenda allows elected members an opportunity to speak freely and openly as we would in committee. So I move for deferral to committee.
Okay, so that's a procedural motion. And so there can be no discussion on the procedural motion. I think that's been seconded by Alderman Briscoe. So there can be no discussion on that deferral. So if you'd like to, sorry, Councillor Dutty, you've got your hand up.
Just a clarification, Lord Mayor. If it's appropriate only, I just wanted to know why the CEO presented it to the council instead of the committee.
Okay, I'll allow a question, yes. CEO.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, it's essentially the understanding that we had from the last ordinary council meeting was that it was to come back to council. I committed to presenting both reports back on the 30th, and apologies, Lord Mayor, if I misunderstood that, but we've worked to get both reports back, obviously in council's hands now in terms of how you treat this. But I think the response that I provided to Alderman Briscoe at the last meeting was that this set of motions and the consideration of motions would not in any way impact the timing of the receipt of the notice of motion response report. But I think there has been some confusion in that regard, Lord Mayor, so my apologies for that. I had thought I'd committed to bringing them back to the same meeting.
Okay, so it's not, there's no further questions for the CEO. It's a procedural motion. So I will see how people want to vote. Is there any dissent to the procedural motion? I think there is dissent, so I'm going to do a call around. Deputy Lord Mayor, how do you vote?
Against.
Alderman Zuko.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Sexton.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Alderman Barakis.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
Yeah, for.
Councillor Fox.
For.
Councillor Sherlock. Oh, she's not here. That's right. Councillor Coates.
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote for it as well. Okay, so that item will not be considered tonight. So we will consider now the old item 14, which is now the new item 9, which is the response to the notice of motion. Would someone like to move the recommendation? I don't see any hands up. Can I see a hand up? Alderman Thomas, and seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. Any discussion? Alderman Brakis.
Just a question, Lord Mayor. In regards to part 3 of this recommendation, now that we have deferred item 15, would we need to reflect that in part 3 and note that the outcome of that particular that public meeting being the subject of another report that's been referred to committee? Because it's no longer going to be discussed on this agenda.
Yeah, of another report, full stop.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an amendment from Alderman Brakis, but I think it's probably fairly technical. So
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I hadn't moved the amendment yet. I was seeking some guidance from the CEO, if possible, as to whether or not that would tidy things up a bit better.
well, I think it clearly does, because it refers to this agenda. Sorry, so the mover of that motion was Alderman Thomas, and the seconder was Deputy Lord Mayor. So are you happy to modify
Happy, Lord Mayor.
the motion slightly, because that's quite a
Yes,
small
yes, indeed,
amendment.
Lord Mayor.
Okay, and Deputy?
Yes, that's fine, Lord Mayor.
Just removing the words on this agenda. Okie doke. So any further discussion?
Yes, Lord Mayor. Look, this is my personal view. I'm not going to move a deferral motion because I don't want to get into a nasty debate. But I believe that I would have preferred this in a more able to be debated by elected members. I'm not going to. I also move suspension of standing orders. This is a very important motion. I would have also preferred this to be a committee, but I'm not going to move a deferral. I'm staying away from that, Lord Mayor. I'm just making my point that I would have preferred some really good discussion on this, and I don't think one, being on Zoom and outside of the chamber, and two, not in a committee environment is sort of the appropriate place to debate it. So I'm just going to sit back and just mind my own business. I've made my point.
All right, so any further discussion? Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I mean, I take the point that Alderman Zuko has made, and on that basis, in the context of things, and the fact that the two of them are conjoined, I would move for a deferral on that as well.
I need a seconder for a deferral motion by seconded by Councillor Harvey. There's no debate on a deferral motion, so I will put that all. Oh, is there any dissent to the deferral motion? I see no hands up, so that one is also deferred. Okay, so we'll move now to the planning items, which is 9.1. And I'll invite I think Alderman Brakis is going.
Do you just want to let Councillor Sherlock back in?
Sure.
Chair, could I just ask, I'm having technical difficulties. As soon as I put up my hand, it disappears. So I don't know whether you control those hands going up or not, but if you see my physical hand going up, could you treat that as a hand up, Lord Mayor?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't control the hands, so.
Right, someone must, because I put it up and suddenly it goes down, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm controlling them, Jeff, tonight. So
yes, well, my friend controlling them, I'm really happy about that.
and I'm going to turn your volume off in a minute. Yeah.
Okay, item 9.1, Deputy Lord Mayor, I think you were saying that Alderman Barakis is going to introduce this one.
That's right.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, 9.1 for Mitre Crescent Sandy Bay change of use to visitor accommodation. The item was referred to council without a recommendation, so I'll move the motion that was, or the recommendation of the officers for approval with conditions, Lord Mayor.
Okay, that's been seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Thank you. Yeah, Lord Mayor, there was a number of discretions here, and the being parking and access, landslide, and planning directive number 6. The officers in their recommendation have suggested that this is compliant with the planning scheme with a number of conditions which are included in the recommendation. So I'll move that, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Hand up, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I won't be supporting this and will instead foreshadow a motion for refusal based on the Planning Directive 6 and in relation to parking and access, which was something that was brought up by neighbours who were concerned about this $4 million 4-bedroom house with how many bathrooms was it? I think 3 bathrooms not being put on the short stay accommodation market, but to continue as a home in that area of Lower Sandy Bay. So I'll foreshadow that as a reason for refusal, and I think there are reasons for refusal that I've sent through to Mr. Garth. Thank you.
Okay, so that's been that's a foreshadowed motion from Deputy Lord Mayor. If we need that, we'll get a seconder at the point in time. Councillor Fox.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to second the motion for refusal. I think it's really silly that we're still considering.
Sorry, Councillor Fox, there is no motion. It's foreshadowed, but you wanted to speak against the motion in front of us?
Yes, I do. I think it's really silly for us to keep approving short stay accommodations when we know we've got a housing crisis going on and we've got our bylaw going up to planning, I think next month or something like that. I think, we should have a little bit more discretion in these applications until such a time that we have a more strategic approach to it, because otherwise we're just going to keep adding to the housing crisis. And I think that's really
okay. Further discussion? Further discussion? Councillor Dutta?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The question that I ask with this particular application is whether this proposal, the application satisfies the provision of the Planning Directive number 6. Now, I have read the concerns of a number of people who have made their concerns very clear to us. And I'm, as a planning authority, putting that hat on, I need to distinguish that what are the planning issues and what are non-planning issues. Now, for me, the affordability and availability and rental market, etc., does not fall in the planning scheme, and therefore it is not something I use as a criteria to make my judgment and decision on this matter, even though I think they are very valid concerns that are raised. However, when I put this application under the planning scheme and look at clause 3(1)(e)(p)(1), there are 2 limbs in this particular clause. It states that visitor accommodation must be compatible with the character and use of the area. So my question is this compatible with the character and use of the area? And I agree with the staff that they have said, they have concluded that it in fact is compatible with the character and use of the area. The second limb of that, if you look at it, it says, and not cause an unreasonable loss of amenity having regard to A to F, there are 6 elements or criteria that we look at. A states that the privacy of adjoining properties, and B, any likely increase in noise. Now, if you look at the staff report, point 6.7.5, you will notice in there, and I quote, it states, it is noted that the property is relatively large, which has 3 or 4 bedrooms, and has the potential of accommodating about 6 to 8 people. Now, the statement there indicates to me that if it was rented out, a family usually has about 2 children. So there'll be 4 if it's rented out. But if it's sent out as a visitor accommodation, it is approved and it's gone out as that, no doubt what the staff is saying to us that they'll have an increase of people staying in the house, and the maximum would be 8 or even more. Now, that would logically indicate to me, even though it's an assumption, like the assumptions are made about 6 and 8, that there will be increase of noise. The question here also is about B, any likely increase in noise to the adjoining properties. Now, again, and I quote this, it says in the staff report, neighboring dwelling to the south is built quite close to its northern boundary. And if that is the case, then I think that the noise would make an impact. And for me, that would be unreasonable. And here I'm using my own discretion to make that judgment. And therefore, I will not support this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dutta. Any further discussion? Any further comments? No further comments. I will just make a few comments myself. I do agree with Councillor Dutta on this particular reason that we can give for refusal. There's quite a lot of visitor accommodations in this area. I mean, they haven't taken over the residential amenity, but it's certainly, I've personally had quite a few complaints in this vicinity of party houses, the nature of this location being, you know, quite sort of luxury houses, large houses with views over the river. They do tend to get booked out all weekend for sort of big sort of significant gatherings that seem to sort of, I guess they're termed party house by, you know, this is something that's an issue for a lot of visitor accommodation in other cities, and other state governments do have rules about party houses and 3 strikes and you're out, and all of these sort of rules to sort of manage this, because it is certainly a phenomenon that is creating quite a lot of concern. And I would also just ask a question, if I just can stop for a moment and ask the Director of City Planning, or the Head of City Planning, to what extent do you have any ability to assess privacy or likely increase in noise apart from a sort of general, you know, how is that assessed by staff?
Yes, well, in terms of privacy issue, it's the relationship between adjacent dwellings and the like. In relation to noise, what the likely scale of the operation, likely scale of the dwelling is, and again, its relationship with adjacent dwellings.
And so does that involve, sorry, just a follow-up question, does that involve any site visits, or is it sort of just done based on looking at the size of the property and the sort of location, or do you sort of go and make some assessments on site from neighbouring properties? Or
yes, I always advocate for my officers to go on site to visit types of proposals. So I have no doubt that that has occurred in this instance.
Okay. And they, right.
Their conclusion, sorry, you're right.
Sorry.
Well, clearly their conclusion was that it should not cause unreasonable noise or loss of privacy. They did suggest a condition that stipulated that should not allow for multiple bookings at the one time, i.e. part of the dwelling being rented out for separate groups. So there was that additional condition recommended.
And how would that be monitored?
Well, if there was, very difficult to monitor it in real time, if there were obviously complaints raised and we undertook investigations on that basis, then, and there was a breach, then we could take enforcement action under those circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if there's no further discussion, Alderman Brooks, would you like to sum up at all?
No, thanks, Lord Mayor.
Okay, so if there's, I think I'll probably do a whip around because I'm sure there might be different views on this. So all those in favour of the motion, I'll just go around and see if you're in favour. Deputy Lord Mayor?
Against.
Zuko?
For.
Alderman Briscoe?
For the motion.
Alderman Sexton?
For.
Alderman Thomas?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
Against.
Alderman Barakis?
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta?
Against.
Councillor Fox?
Against.
Councillor Sherlock?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Coates?
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote against.
Lord Mayor, does that mean it's a 6-6 and it goes to the director?
Alderman
It's a
Zuko,
question.
We'll get that information from the CEO who's managing the reporting back on that. CEO or Mr. Jackson, can you report back on the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Through you, Lord Mayor, the motion was lost 6-all.
Okay, so we have a foreshadowed motion for refusal.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, thank you, Lord Mayor. Move for refusal in that the proposal does not meet the acceptable solution or the performance criterion with respect to clause 3.1A, A1 or P1 of the Planning Directive number 6, because the gross floor area is in excess of 200 square metres and the proposal was not compatible with the character and use of the area and would cause an unreasonable loss of residential amenity. And 2, the proposal does not meet the acceptable solution or the performance criteria with respect to clause E 6.6.1 A1 or P1 due to the parking which the proposal will require. So moved.
So that's been moved by Deputy Lord Mayor and I think that's seconded by Councillor Fox. Any discussion on the foreshadowed motion? No discussion. Okay, I'll see if there's a different vote on that one. So Deputy Lord Mayor?
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zuko?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Sexton?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Harvey?
For.
Alderman Barakis?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta?
For.
Councillor Fox?
For.
Councillor Sherlock?
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Coates?
Against, Lord Mayor.
And Councillor and myself, I'll vote for that motion. So that is again a tied vote. So that will have to be referred to the Director of City Planning to make a determination. A question from Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, could I ask a question through you to the Director, Mr. Noy?
Mr. Noy?
Thank you. Look, the question is, probably we all know the answer, but I think it's worth asking the question for our audience out there in YouTube land. Seeing it was a tied vote with no recommendation from the council, what will the officer's recommendation be?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation in my determination.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and then if the residents don't want to support it, they can appeal that through the processes. Okay, so moving on now to item 10.2. It's the new 10, which is the old 9.2, 78 Alexander Street. I'll ask Alderman, Deputy Lord Mayor, did you want to move this one? No. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Item 9.2, 78 Alexander Street, 12 French Street, Sandy Bay, and adjacent road reserve. I'll move that, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by, I need a hand up. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Lord Mayor, this is for a application. It's a motion to approve an application for partial demolition, alterations, extension to multiple dwellings, one existing, one new, associated hydraulic infrastructure in the council reserve at 78 Alexander Street, 12 French Street, Sandy Bay. There was no representations against this one, Lord Mayor. The reason it's before council is because the proposal involves council land. So I'll just leave that there and yes.
So further discussion on this? Any further discussion, any further information? For anyone who wasn't on the committee? There is none. Okay. So I'll put that. Is there any dissent to the approval? There's no dissent, so that's been carried unanimously. Item, and I've just been informed that we are still on 9.3. Those other two items keep their same numbers, even though they were dealt with separately. So item 9.3 is 6368 Macquarie Street, change of use to visitor accommodation. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Item 9.3 is another one that was brought on without a recommendation. So I'll move the council officer's recommendations for approval.
Seconded by Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is another one that came before council. This one came before council because it was called in by an elected member and had 3 objections. It was once again recommended for approval by council officers, had 2 discretions, one being visitor accommodation and parking, and Plan Directive number 6, and parking. And once again, the officers had recommended approval for that and deemed it compliant with the appropriate conditions, which are included. I think my personal views on this issue are pretty well known now, so I won't enter into that debate right now, but I would just hope that we are making decisions according to the planning scheme that we have and the rules of the day that we have today, and not the rules that we might be expecting to come in effect in the future, Lord Mayor.
Okay, further discussion. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Fox.
Yeah, I just have a question through you to the director, if I might. Just would like to know if we can get some advice on how many visitor accommodation permits we've approved and rejected so far in 2022, and if you know how many we've done since this council was elected. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair. I do have those figures in front of me. So for this year, This calendar year, so far we've approved 38 applications. There were 4 exempt, not requiring planning consent, and there were 2 refused applications by council. So for the term of this council, we've had 287 applications approved. There were 7 in total refused and 19 exempt from requiring planning consent.
Thanks, Neil.
Next hand up looks like Deputy Lord Mayor.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I'll speak in a moment.
Okay, Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Look, I'll be foreshadowing a motion for refusal if this doesn't get up.
Okay, is that all you want to say?
That's all I'll say at this point. Yep.
Okay, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have a few questions, if I may, through you to the director.
Yes, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you. In the report, and I'm not able to identify the page, maybe you'd be able to, Director, where it states that the as advised by successive traffic engineers, the empirical parking assessment on site, on the street, etc. I am wanting to know, when was this empirical evidence done, or when was this survey conducted?
Look, Chair, I don't have that information in front of me at the moment. I'm happy to provide that information out of session. I do know, however, that there has been some developments that occurred in the vicinity in recent years, and it may have been a product of those developments and the investigation into those developments. So, but happy to take that one on notice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Dutta, is that everything you want to say?
Just one more question, and I think it is in regards to that there is a relatively large supply of on-street parking in the surrounding area. Again, when was this determined? Is this related to the other question that I asked, or is this a separate issue?
Yeah, through you, Chair, that's correct. It's related to the previous question.
Right, and then the final question is where it's the statement is made that observations indicate that there is a pool of parking that would be available to meet the potential demands. Who made this observation, and when was it made, and what time of the day?
Again, Chair, I'd need to take that one on notice for those specific questions.
Thank you. That's all, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And look, this is a bit of a follow-up to Councillor Fox's question, because I think it was a really good one, and it would better inform us as a decision-making committee. But through you to the director, if that's okay. Obviously, we've heard that the officers have assessed and under delegation have given approval, because it fits within the planning scheme, quite a number of permits since this year, but also since this term of council. I guess for the public benefit and interest and confidence in our city. I mean, surely some of those, did any of those get rejected at tribunal? What level of mistake have the officers made in terms of their recommendations?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I'm unaware of any being refused by the tribunal.
Oh, so our recommendations at 100% success rate.
That is my, well, sorry, you're talking about the officers or the councils?
Well, the officers, the permits that have been issued, none of those have been overturned at tribunal.
No, none that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Discussion?
Just a question, just a follow-up question.
Sorry, Councillor Dutta. Alderman Brooks had his hand up first.
Sorry.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And through you, just a follow-up to Councillor Coates' question. I'll just ask the Director about the inverse of the question that Councillor Coates put. Do you know what the success rate is on council decisions that have gone against, council decisions on short stay applications that have gone against the officer's recommendation, how they're fared in the tribunal? Have they been turned, have they been successful, or are they seeming to come back overturned?
These are quite complex questions, but if you do you want to try and answer them, because there's quite a lot of detail for probably these kind of statistics.
Yes, Lord Mayor. Look, I'm not fully aware. I know there was one recently brought back that council agreed to, but I'm unaware of the others that might have been subject to appeal contrary to officer recommendations. So again, I'd have to take that one on notice.
Thank you for
that. Councillor Fox.
Yeah, also just to follow up on Councillor Coates and Alderman Barakis, I'm just really interested to know why we're using words like successes in relation to proliferation of short stay accommodation when we've got also a proliferation of, people sleeping in their cars and unable to get into the housing market. Like, just because we're following the letter of the law doesn't mean that we're delivering the right outcomes for our communities. And this is our opportunity to actually do something about it. And I just think it's really disappointing that we lack the courage as a council to do that.
A point of clarification, if I could, Chair. I believe that was a question as to the language I used.
No, sorry, Councillor Coates. I've received advice that it's not quite a point of clarification. It's called a point of personal explanation, and it's item 24 of the Local Government Act, and it's explain a matter of personal nature in the absence of a motion on the matter, if on the opinion of the chairperson it's in the interest of the councillor and the council to hear from the councillor on that personal explanation. So there's just been a little bit of confusion around point of clarification. So we'll just take Councillor Fox's contribution as their contribution to the debate and see if there's any further discussion that anyone wants to make to this item. Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Again, I want to refer to the planning scheme directive, planning directive number 6, E661.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. Point of order. Now I might be wrong here, but hasn't Councillor Dutta already spoken on this item?
I thought he asked a question.
Okay. If that's the case, I just thought he'd spoken. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Briscoe, for raising that point. I am sure I asked 2 questions, or could have been 3. Thank you very much. Let me speak to it now. E661P1 states that the number of on-site car parking spaces must be sufficient to meet the reasonable needs of users, having regard to all of the following. Now, firstly, I make one observation here, and the observation is this. It states that the reasonable needs of users, the reasonable use doctrine, my understanding is that it refers to a means that the users ought not to be hindered or deprived of the use of a parking space. That's the doctrine of the user doctrine, reasonableness, in my understanding. Now, if that is the case, then the report by staff quite clearly states that there are times during peak hours that it is going to be difficult. Now, in nowhere in the 6 criteria there, it mentions about peak time. And therefore, you can't use a peak time to justify that it will be available for people to park there. The second observation I make here is this, that the element A and B states, element A says car parking demand, and B, the availability on street public car parking in the locality. Now, when I interpret this, there is, according to the report, quite a lot of demand for parking in this particular area. Observations by the staff, and we don't have the details as to when these observations were made and the time of the day, others who live in the area, who spend most of the time in the area, and the recent development in the area, it is very difficult. My observation is that it is very difficult to find a parking place. Now, therefore, it does not meet the criteria, because the criteria does not say that during peak hours, if it's not available, and during non-peak hours, it is available. So you can't use this argument in here. And therefore, in my view, it does not satisfy those two elements of E661P1. Thank you.
Any further discussion? No discussion? Okay. Well, if there's no further discussion, I'll just say a few points. I think Councillor Dutta raises a good point. For those of you who haven't checked where these two, well, this one and the next one actually, but they're right next door to each other. These properties are right next door to the Salad Bowl supermarket in South Hobart. There's also a lot of shopping and school and hospital parking all around here. There is no off-street parking on either one. So very clearly, this parking discretion is real. It is a discretion available to this council. I do have my doubts about why the staff haven't picked up on this, and I think it is certainly there as a discretion. If you've ever considered that the area around Salad Bowl has parking challenges for residents and users of the shopping strip, then that is certainly a discretion available to you. But I would also like to endorse Councillor Fox's concerns about us being a little bit, we need to recognise that we're having this debate in a very technocratic sense about something that is a real crisis for people. The planning directive number 6 is not a planning scheme that we designed, that our staff said was good planning, that, you know, even planning experts would say is good planning. It was a ministerial directive to deregulate the visitor accommodation sector completely, or almost completely. It's one of the most deregulated visitor accommodation markets in the country, possibly even the world. And that's why we are getting some of the highest densities of visitor accommodation in the world. We have lost, at least by the numbers, over 300 whole home. These aren't units or share house rooms. These are entire homes. At least, yeah, over 300 by these numbers, just in the time that we've been at council. And yes, we're required to do this by the state planning minister, but that does not mean that this should be portrayed in any sense as good policy, as proper, well-considered planning policy. The only thing behind this planning policy was the desire to deregulate, and it has led to the loss of a huge number of private rental properties, and our private rental market has shrunk dramatically in the last 3 years. Now we can debate about, well, you know, we should build more houses, but these are houses that are there already, and many of them would have been on the private rental market and available for long-term rental. Now they're not, because it's a more profitable way for investors to have these properties empty for a lot of the time and then used in the peak periods of weekends and holidays and events. And, you know, our hotel industry is also feeling this impact. And so, you know, this should be our signal to say to the state government that this really is a very difficult policy for us. Obviously, we've made a policy decision to try and wind some of this back, but that the wheels of that reform is very, very slow. And so it is, when we have a discretion, you know, I think we need to recognise that this is a much more complex issue than just saying, oh, the planner said it's okay. There's a lot more to it. And the reason the planner said it's okay is because of their requirement to under the Ministerial Planning Directive. Thank you. Did you want to sum up?
I will, Lord Mayor, just quickly, and just following on from what you said. Yes, the officers have a requirement to follow the wording of the planning directive, the ministerial directive, but at the end of the day, so do we. I appreciate and note that we have put forward suggestions, or we have endorsed policy changes for short stay applications, but until such rules are in effect and have gone through that process, we are effectively duty bound to adhere to and assess applications according to the rules of the day. Any applicant who puts a application for a DA, regardless of what sort of DA it is, under the rules of the day, has a right to be assessed under those rules as their understanding of them and as what the rules are of that day. So we can't and we shouldn't be applying the rules that we would like to see in effect. We can only apply the rules that are in effect. And look, I have expectations that the rules that the rule changes that we put forward recently that need to go through that planning process will eventually take effect. And when that comes around, we will have a different way of looking at planning applications for short stay. But until then, we have the rules in front of us. And as much as I appreciate the concerns that yourself and Councillor Fox have raised regarding the housing supply, and obviously the flip side of that being, you know, approving housing applications, but not to get into that debate, we do have a responsibility here as the planning authority to assess the individual applications according to the rules of the day. So I'll leave it there, Lord Mayor, and I'll commend the recommendations from the officers.
I've just got a hand up from Deputy Lord Mayor. Was that a question?
Yeah, just a question through you to the CEO or Mr. Noy. Is this do we have discretions in relation to this item, Mr. Noy?
Lord Mayor, yes, you do.
Thank you.
Lord Mayor, can I ask a question as well?
Yes.
Through you to through the director, through the CEO to the director. I can ask a question, please.
Yeah, through me to the director. Yes.
Oh yes, through the wall. Okay. Director, does the council under the planning scheme have discretions just about on every application that comes forward, unless it meets the criteria?
Through you, Chair.
Good question.
Yeah. That's correct, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll go around and ask you to say your vote on this item 9.3. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zurko.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
For, Chair.
Alderman Sexton.
Against.
Alderman Thomas.
I'll vote against.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Alderman Barakis.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
Against.
Councillor Fox.
Against.
Councillor Sherlock. Councillor Sherlock.
Oh, yes, sorry, against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Coates.
For, Lord Mayor.
And myself against. So that was Mr. Jackson, our CEO.
That was lost, Lord Mayor, 4 votes to 8.
Okay, so I think there is an alternative foreshadowed from, is it Councillor Harvey, I think?
Yep, thanks, Lord Mayor. So I'll move for refusal based on parking and access code, number of parking spaces, E 6.6.1, part 1. But also like to ask a question of Mr. Noy. You stated earlier.
I'll just mention that's been seconded by Councillor Dutta.
Thank you. Mr. Noy, you said there were 7 short stay accommodation applications that were refused. Could you please outline the main reasons for refusal for those 7,
Sorry,
if you can remember it?
Sorry, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Harvey, those were over the course of this council, the 7 refusals. So I think that's a very big question for Mr. Noy to try and take on right now.
Okay, so they weren't in our term as council. They were in what period? Only 7 used.
Sorry, Mr. Noy, do you want to just repeat your overarching statistics? I did write it down, but just to
the 7 refused relate to the period November 2018 to the present time.
Okay, and that was pre PD6, was it?
No, PD6 was in existence at that time.
And what was, and you can't recall what the major reason was?
Yeah, through you, Lord Mayor, no, I was not, I can't recall the specifics of all of those 7 applications.
Yep. No, that's fine. But look, there is the ability for elected representatives to disagree with the findings of the officers and the officers' report. And you need to state those reasons, and I'll be stating the reason as the parking and access code. So therefore, I'll be supporting a recommendation for refusal on this item.
Okay, and that was seconded by Councillor Dutta. Further discussion on this? I've got Deputy Lord Mayor's hand is up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I'll make my points brief, but just in relation to this, this is an existing 2-bedroom multiple dwelling, which is right next to shops. It's on a bus route. It is perfect as a home, and in my opinion, it would not be the best use as visitor accommodation. And just in relation to the ministerial directive, PD6, which was put together some years ago now, since then, we as a city have faced quite different times from when that was introduced. So we do have a housing crisis, and we do need to consider how that impacts on residential amenity as well for local communities, in this case, local community of South Hobart.
Councillor Dutta's hand up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a question through you to the director, and I refer to E661P1B, which states the availability of on-street and public car parking in the locality. Am I correct to say that it does not in any way there state anything at all about normal working hours and peak hours to use as a criteria to approve this?
Mr. Noy.
Yes, Chair, that's correct. It doesn't make reference to those times.
Thank you. Therefore, Lord Mayor, having received that answer, I once again want to reinforce quite strongly that under that criteria, it does not satisfy. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I don't disagree with the comments made by Councillor Fox and Councillor Harvey and the Deputy. And it appears the night of statistics, and I'd be interested to know, during the lockdown and the height of the COVID pandemic, a lot of short stay accommodation went back to long-term rentals, or do we keep any statistics, or have we have means to audit that?
Mr. Noy? Did you want to answer that, Mr. Noy, or or CEO?
Sorry, it's taken me a little time to get my image back up, Lord Mayor. But no, it's not a practical thing that we can duly audit, because these do swap in and out, can swap in and out without reference to council. So it's not a practical thing that we can duly audit.
So a supplementary question, Chair.
Yes.
I know we're going through all sorts of mechanisms to help the housing crisis, and one is the amendment, the suggested amendment the council approved that is going through the system at the moment. Have we considered other mechanisms such as a differential rate for short stay accommodation, whole houses, and in that way we would be able to pick up whether a rental short stay accommodation is returned to rental or vice versa?
Mr. Noy?
Chair, I do recall a question being responded to in relation to the issue of differential rating for this use. Maybe the CEO might recall the outcome of that question.
Through you, Lord Mayor, my understanding was that it was actually the subject of a notice of motion that was endorsed by Council, presented by Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Helen Burnett, and that's something that the officers are still working through. In totality, I would hasten to add, just in regards to a range of other matters concerning rates and that broader approach generally. So perhaps Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor might not like to comment on that further, but it is certainly something that Council's officers are currently actioning in accordance with that unanimous resolution, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a question through you to the Director, if I could.
Yes.
Director, I'm just after some guidance potentially, for the record. Just wondering, is there potentially a conflict of interest issue with an elected member assessing a development application that's within 100 metres of a property or business they own?
I don't think that's a question for me, Chair.
To the CEO then, or potentially Mr. Jackson.
I think the question, it's not really related to the I guess you're saying it is related to the motion. Okay. Would anyone like to respond to that in the administration?
So, Lord Mayor, can I just ask Alderman Barakis to repeat the question, please?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Lord Mayor. Just after some guidance as to whether or not there would be a potential conflict of interest issue to an elected member taking part in debate on a development application that's within 100 metres of a business or property that they own.
So I think, Lord Mayor, as most elected members are aware, it's really a matter for individual elected members to make that assertion as it relates to their own conflict of interest. So without wanting to sound overly bureaucratic, that's kind of the way that the legislation reads, and it is a matter for individual elected members, and we're certainly happy to provide specific advice independently to elected members if they'd like to pose that question from a legal perspective to to an independent legal provider. But at the end of the day, it's a matter for elected members to determine whether in fact they do have a conflict of interest in matters or not one for the administration, Lord Mayor.
Okay, I'm going to see if there's anyone who wants to sum up. Alderman Councillor Harvey.
No, Lord Mayor.
Okay, so I'm going to go around and put the vote. Deputy Lord Mayor, do you support the The new motion, yeah. Alderman Zuko.
I think Alderman
Zuko, can't hear you. Oh, where's he gone?
He's gone.
He's left.
Yes, he's just walked past me.
Lord Mayor, sorry, just for completeness, Alderman Zuko did advise earlier that he had a commitment that he needed to attend at 6:15. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Sure. Alderman Briscoe.
For consistency, I'll vote yes to the motion.
Alderman Sexton.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas.
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Councillor Harvey.
For.
Alderman Barakis.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Fox.
For.
Councillor Sherlock.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Coates.
Against, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote for. Mr. Jackson, did you want to?
Carried, Lord Mayor. 9 votes to 2.
Okay, moving on to 9.4, which is basically a very similar item, I think. Alderman Barakis, did you want to introduce it?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I'll introduce 9.4 for 370 Macquarie Street. That was another one that came to committee without a recommendation, so I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Okay, further discussion? Someone like to explain any of the elements of it?
Lord Mayor, I'm happy to just finish that off. It's second verse, same as the first, Lord Mayor. It's almost a carbon copy of the other one. So I think everything that's said in the previous item pretty much applies to this one.
So, and it's next door, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have we got a second, Lord Mayor?
Oh, sorry. Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Coates? Okay, given it is similar, I don't know whether anyone wants to discuss, or will I put it straight to the vote? Deputy Lord Mayor.
I'll foreshadow motion for refusal again.
Okay, all those, no further discussion, I'll put that. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Against.
Alderman Briscoe.
Against.
Alderman Sexton.
Against.
Alderman Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Alderman Barakis.
For, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
Against.
Councillor Fox.
Against.
Councillor Sherlock.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Coates.
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'm against. So that's not carried. And so I'll see the foreshadowed motion for refusal, I think, has been put by Deputy Lord Mayor. Seconded by, need a seconder. Councillor Harvey. Just wondering if I have to do that roll call again, or whether I can just do all those in favour, but I might. Can we try all those in favour and see if we get everyone's hands up? See if I've got that right. Hold your hands up. So all those in favour is Councillor Dutta, Councillor Thomas, Councillor Fox, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Alderman Briscoe. Sorry for calling you Councillor if you're an alderman. And myself for that motion, and against is Councillor Coates and Alderman Barakis. They're the only two hands I see against. Okay, so we're moving on now to item 10, which is a proposal to amend the southern growth boundary in Druthi Point. Who'd like to introduce this item? Is it Deputy Lord Mayor?
Alderman Barakis, do you want to?
Yeah, if you could do that one, Deputy, because I would actually like to speak against this one, if that's okay.
Yes, Chairman, I'll move that the motion as it stands.
And that's been supported. That's at the moment. Alderman Thomas, did you want to support the motion for refusal?
I'm going to support the motion. We don't support at this time the amendment.
Okay. So that's been seconded by Alderman Thomas. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, just by way of introduction, Lord Mayor, this kind of change to the urban growth boundary does come to council periodically, even though it's in another council local government area. And essentially, the advice in relation to this application of a change in the urban growth boundary at Drury Point is really contrary to good planning. I point everybody to part 2.6 on page 639 of the planning agenda, and it says, it is recommended the council on balance and at this time does not support the proposal to amend the land use strategy by extending the urban growth boundary to include an additional 58 hectares of land at Drury Point. Rather, such an amendment should be considered as part of the greater Hobart plan, and we've just come from a workshop in relation to that, which will ultimately feed into a fuller review of the land use strategy in southern Tasmania, planned in the next 2 years. And it goes on to say that it really should be considering planning impacts of the proposal in light of the Greater Hobart Plan project, the wider potential impact on the proposal on traffic into other municipal areas, particularly the Hobart CBD. So there'll be an impact on traffic should this subdivision go ahead, and the potential cumulative impacts of extensions to the urban growth boundary. Lord Mayor, last week, I was fortunate enough to attend the Planning Institute of Australia Congress, which was held for the first time for a couple of years and held here in Hobart. So it was great to welcome delegates there. And a lot of the discussion at that Planning Congress was around how you make things work sustainably. Now, to my mind, what is proposed at Sanford as part of this extension is far and beyond what is required, given that we have quite a number of housing development potential within that urban growth boundary, both for Clarence in other municipalities, but also in our city of Hobart. So I highly recommend that the council endorse the recommendation from council officers. Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Look, with previous applications or letters to us asking it for approval or disapproval of other change in the urban growth boundaries, they've been very minor and had the support of the council involved. This one, we haven't got a council report from Clarence. It's not in Sanford. Sorry, Deputy, I think you might have been a slip of the tongue there. It's actually quite some distance from Sanford, so it's probably between Rokeby and Tranmere. It's the hillside there. Drury is not Sanford. Yeah, so it was a slip of the, probably a slip of the tongue. And I think because of the extent of it, I think a blind Freddie could say that's going to have an influence on the traffic of traffic into Hobart. And so I think in this case, in the other cases, I've always supported the minor change in the urban growth boundary. In this case, it is a major change and has a major influence on traffic, particularly on traffic. In theory, it's probably a good idea. The land is close to central Hobart. It has got unique problems, but I do remember when this whole peninsula was rezoned, and quite big areas were set aside for one lot. I think it was 24 hectares or something like that. So it protected the character of Drury Point, and particularly the end of Drury Point there, where it's an old whaling station, Tri Point, I think it's called Tri Point or something like that. It's a very historic site, and under these plans, that area is going to be pretty urbanised. The plans that this mob want to do with this area. So it's probably, I would say, we should keep out of the affairs of a neighbouring council. But in this case, because it's such a major development, I think we should have an opinion. It's not our decision. We're just giving an advice or opinion, our opinion. Now, we don't make a decision. Decisions in other hands. So in this case, I'll be supporting the motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coates.
Look, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep my contribution brief. It's similar to what I said at committee. Look, I mean, I've been contacted on this one by people already and lobbied for. And look, I think that probably lends itself in some ways weight. But, you know, ultimately, the best people to make a decision on this are the City of Clarence themselves. They can get the information and they can come through. Normally, I'd be jumping up and down to seek to increase housing and access to housing. But I think as a principle, we should adopt that in these instances, we don't have a view for or against. You know, ultimately, I think we should try and allow people to make decisions when they gather all the evidence. And I can appreciate some would say this is an evidence gathering exercise, but what I don't have in front of me is traffic modelling showing what the impact will be coming into the City of Hobart. What I don't have in front of me is, you know, modelling on Clarence Road. What I don't have in front of me, even though I know that there's funding for the improved ferry access, you know, the ability for people in Generation Y and millennials trying to get into housing to be able to actually get there and get over to the City of Hobart easily on a ferry. And so I'd love to have that evidence in front of me and say, yes, approve this project. We need more housing. It's desperate. There's a need. But the flip side is I also don't have that evidence in front of me to necessarily reject this. So look, at committee, I made the observation that it is perfectly acceptable for our opinion to be that we don't have an opinion neither for nor against the project. And I think that is one that I would implore other elected members to take. I know some of you can see that as you know, perhaps not providing what we were asked to provide, but I mean, ultimately, if we were to make a determination on this, we would want our officers to go in to do all that modelling, to get all the evidence, to do the work, to come up with a very informed opinion. And that hasn't been done. We're not asking our officers to do it. And I really do think that in this instance, there are competing priorities. And look, from our perspective as a City of Hobart, we should just say to the City of Clarence that, look, you know, we trust you to make ultimately the right decision. And we don't have an opinion neither for nor against this project. And I think we should go with that. So I can't find myself supporting the recommendation that's in front of us right now.
Councillor Coates, I think you did you want to foreshadow a motion for have no opinion one way or the other?
Look, happy to do so. Or seeing as how it went in committee, I don't know that I'll subject us all to another vote.
Well, I'm just saying that, yeah, it doesn't. If that's your view about what the decision should be, you can foreshadow that. I'll leave it with you to think about that if it doesn't get up. Who was next? Alderman Thomas.
Yes, thanks, Lord Mayor. Look, unless I'm mistaken, most of us were at a workshop this afternoon in which the Department of State Growth and others gave us an incredibly succinct discussion and set of statistics in relation to housing going forward. Now, at that workshop, there was comment made that how are we incentivising or working with developers at the moment in relation to that proposal to really strategically, for the first over a 30-year, 40-year timeframe, look at housing density, particularly housing needs, and that extended beyond the municipal boundaries of our city. And whilst I'm certainly not one to tell Clarence how to deal with planning applications, the reality is that particular increase in the scale of urban development outside of the current boundaries of the urban growth boundaries will have potentially significant impacts on a range of matters that were raised by the very people that took the time to address us this afternoon. Now, I'm not saying we can do much necessarily, but I think this is the sort of development if indeed, and I understand, and again, I'm only getting it third hand from people against the extension, is that the availability, the proportion of land that is currently available in that particular municipality and elsewhere is currently in excess of what is projected to be needed in terms of development over the foreseeable future. I'm not sure how many years I'm talking about, but we have available land. Again, told to me, I can't prove that fact, that within the urban growth boundary as it presently stands, there is sufficient land. Now, yes, we shouldn't go and meddle in the affairs of another council, but when it directly impacts on a regional, not just a Hobart, a greater Hobart set of work that's being done by Department of State Growth and the regional and the region's mayors, I think we do have a caution at least to make, and we should make it very loudly, because here we have a large redevelopment of land outside of the urban growth boundary where the evidence may well be that there is sufficient land currently available within the urban growth boundary to meet existing demand. And this other work is too important, Lord Mayor, for us to ignore and say to Clarence or any other municipality, go ahead, develop what you want, because it doesn't matter, it doesn't worry us. I say it does, and that's why we should have a view. And I think the view that's being taken today is exactly the right one that we should be adopting. Thank you.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would hope after the last two items that we've discussed that we don't have people selectively taking council officers' advice as gospel, especially not when we're talking about getting in the way of additional housing that we need in a housing crisis. I'll just touch on something that was mentioned insofar as the urban growth boundary, and this did come up in committee last week. Part of the Greater Hobart Plan, the draft plan, an excerpt from it does read, the main areas identified for infill and greenfield development include future growth areas within each council are Clarence, primarily infill with some greenfield, including in already identified future growth areas such as Drewry Point and the Drewry Point Peninsula. So, Lord Mayor, my issue with this is, we are talking about I know we were asked as part of the process of this for our opinion, but we are talking about effectively objecting to a pretty large scale, large number of houses that we have all just tonight agreed that we need in a housing crisis. It is also land that this Greater Hobart Plan that we talk about waiting for, that's going to be properly measured and take into consideration of the relevant traffic congestion and residential amenity impacts of the growing southern Tasmanian area. That report does actually identify this area as one for future growth. So I feel like us opposing it today is an attempt to delay the inevitable, because once the report does come through, we'll likely say that this area is prime for development. As part of the future growth strategy. So I'm not sure I agree with the logic here. I do think it's quite unfortunate, given that we have had such an agreement on the issue of housing, if not on the solutions. But look, I'll leave it there. I will just ask Lord Mayor, respectfully, because I actually don't have an issue with part 2 or part 3 of this motion. If we could vote on part 1 separately and then part 2 and 3, because I feel like part 2 and 3 will be very non-controversial. I won't attempt to amend or anything else on number 1, because I feel like I know which way this council is going to lean on this, given the debate, but I might just ask that part 1's voted on separately.
Okay, thanks, Alderman Barakis. Can I actually, before others speak, if they'd like to, can I just seek some clarification from Ms. Panjari, because I think she's across the Greater Hobart plan. My understanding, Ms. Panjari, is that this development is envisaged within the Greater Hobart Plan, and it is a sort of key part of the the growth areas in Clarence that are probably more suited to development than sort of further down towards the South Arm, and that this is actually this is already, most of this peninsula is already within the current urban growth boundary, and it's just a bit at the top that isn't in the growth boundary, and this particular group wants to use that top area for sort of open public space, and that this is very much within the kind of the vision of the Greater Hobart Plan and the growth areas of Clarence. Is that correct?
No, that's actually an accurate reflection of what is identified in the Greater Hobart Plan. So Drudy Point is identified.
Sorry, did you say an inaccurate or accurate?
Accurate.
Okay.
So this Drudy Point development is identified as a future growth area for the Clarence municipality, and the extension to an urban growth boundary in the Greater Hobart Plan is identified based on evidence of need. And the evidence of need in this case is that that extension to the urban growth boundary is raising the urban growth boundary to accommodate shared public open space to provide amenity for that potential housing development.
So just to clarify, the 58 hectares envisaged by this extension is largely for open public space?
Largely, I can't give you the exact figure, but largely it is for public amenity and public open space.
Okay. And just another question that may be yourself or might be Mr. Noyes, is there, given that, is there a reason that the other part of our planning department recommended this for refusal?
I'll pass that on to Mr. Noy.
Yes, Chair. I think it should be considered as part of the wider Greater Hobart Plan. I think that plan has considered the demand based on the current urban growth boundary, and they have done particular significant modelling associated with traffic movement and the like as a result of that urban growth boundary. Any expansion on that urban growth boundary at significant scale may have an impact on that modelling and may have, not insignificant implications for infrastructure that might come from that expansion. So hence why we've recommended that this expansion should be considered as part of that wider Greater Hobart Plan.
Thanks. I won't continue on, but I guess, yeah, we've got a draft Greater Hobart Plan that's in there. So I think it's starting to sort of feel like we're getting slightly different points of view from different parts of the organisation, and it's maybe just a matter of timing. But anyway, sorry, that's me making a comment, which I shouldn't have done. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I was comfortable at the start of the discussion with supporting the officer's recommendation. I supported it as well at the committee meeting, but having listened to the debate here, I'm even stronger in my opinion that we should support the officer's recommendation, and I will be doing so. So I think it's very sensible not to be making ad hoc incursions into the beyond the urban growth boundary, especially when we have the Greater Hobart Plan being assessed or being consulted on at the moment. So very comfortable to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I also would like to support the recommendation of staff. And I make just a few observations. Firstly, it is not something that we as a council are taking the initiative, but it is a request that has come to us to give our opinion on this, or take a position as it were. And it is a matter of process for me that we are required in the process, and the process is they have to go for the Southern Councils to have an input from them. And this is what we are doing. And they also, I understand, as a process, are required to go to the community. Now, having read the recommendation by staff, and the reasons that they have provided. And I think they are quite strong, and I would very strongly support that in the context of the fact that, it must be considered in the part of the 30-year Greater Hobart Plan. And if you don't, we will then will suffer, as we have seen the traffic impact in our city. And so therefore you can't isolate it. We are a greater region that we need to take into account. So therefore, in no uncertain terms, I will not support the council staff recommendation. I recommend that them for writing it up in the way they have done. Thank you.
Further discussion? No further discussion? Okay. If you wouldn't mind popping your hands down, Councillor Harvey and Councillor Dutta. I'm going to actually not support this because I feel that we've got some slightly conflicting advice coming from different parts of planning departments. Strategic plan, this development is envisaged in the Greater Hobart Plan, which I know is out for consultation, but a lot of the state government and city council strategic planners are comfortable with this extension to the urban growth boundary for public open space, not for, there's only a little bit for housing and most of it's for public open space is my understanding. So it's just a bit unfortunate that these two things have sort of come together. Yeah, but I think the direction that the strategic planners are going is that this peninsula is an appropriate place, and it's very the developers are certainly talking about it being a suburb that's got developer contributions to create ferry terminals. It's got river access, and I think some of the traffic issues are being already considered as part of the Greater Hobart Plan. So it's a tricky one, but I do feel that my understanding is that the City of Clarence do envisage this as a key part of their, staying actually within the existing growth boundary with only a small part, and there's many other places that are just about to sort of go well outside our urban growth boundary that I think this council needs to be much more worried about in terms of no services, very limited ability to sort of service by public transport. And this probably wouldn't be one of them, given most of this is already within the urban growth boundary and envisaged in the 30-year plan. So I'm going to just vote a bit differently on this one. So I'll go around and just see how you're going to vote. Deputy Lord Mayor, I just want to sum up. Sorry, someone want to sum up? Please.
Yeah, I'll just summarise, Lord Mayor. I think the point is that this is 58 hectares outside of the urban growth boundary, and it is quite clear in the current land use strategy that there is land available within that urban growth boundary. So this contrary to what Alderman Barakis has suggested, and that might have misled you a little, calculations are really based on what's already within and available.
Point of order, Lord Mayor.
Sorry, point of order, Alderman Barakis.
Yes, I take offence to the notion that I was attempting to mislead you in my statements.
Yeah, I don't think it was meant to be. I don't think it was meant to be an insult. But so it won't be a point of order. But what was the? I'm just Deputy Lord Mayor. Have you actually spoken, or are you summing up? Or
I'm summing up, Lord Mayor.
Oh, you're summing up. Okay.
Yeah, I know it's a little confusing, but maybe just in relation to that, perhaps Mr. Noy can just point out whether this is in fact the reference to things already within the urban growth boundary that Clarence has been basing the comments on.
Mr. Noy.
Yeah, look, I'll refer elected members to section 4.2 of the background of the report, which stipulates that the complete development site is 305 hectares in area, 108 hectares of open space, and including a 57 hectare nature reserve along the ridgeline. So the nature reserve along the ridgeline is 57 hectares. However, it is my understanding, but I may be corrected here, that the extension to the urban growth boundary relates to urban development, not the 57 hectares that's set aside for the nature reserve. And I'm happy to be corrected on that.
Does anyone want to? I don't think anyone would want to comment at this point, probably, Mr. Noy, unless Ms. Panjari wanted to. She probably doesn't know the details of this proposal.
No, I won't comment on details of that proposal. Thank you.
So just to summarise, Lord Mayor, in essence, this isn't recommended to support because it's not good strategic planning. So I commend the officer's report to the council tonight.
Thank you. I'll go around all. Lord Mayor.
Sorry, Lord Mayor. Just a quick question before we put that. Just on my request to vote on part 1 separately.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
So, is there anyone who would like to vote against item 1? That's Alderman Barakis, Councillor Coates, and myself. Item 2 is anyone in dissent of item 2, sorry? No, that's passed unanimously. Any dissent of item 3? That's passed unanimously as well. So I think that was 3 against, all the rest in favour of item 1, and then all unanimously in favour of items 2 and 3. Okay, we're now moving on to finance and governance. Someone will need to move that on behalf of Alderman Zuko.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Any dissent? There's no hands raised in dissent. That's carried unanimously. Item 12 is Parks and Recreation. Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, Lord Mayor. I'll move the motion on the books and reserve my right to speak because I will be speaking against it.
Okay. Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. Deputy Lord Mayor, did you want to speak?
Yes, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. This is to improve to look at the nature, to have a nature strip policy which looks at value adding, if you like, the council nature strips. So setting up guidelines for landscaping nature strips and food gardens on nature strips. It's also, so at the moment, Lord Mayor, not everybody looks after their own nature strip, and it is a significant impost on council, I think above $400,000 per annum on upkeep of the nature strips around our city. Now, obviously not everybody can look after their own nature strip, and there are provisions to help those who are frail, infirmed, or who have difficulty with the topography to do their own maintenance. However, what this does is set aside plants and suitable plants and advice in relation to making the most of people's nature strips across our city. So it's a really positive thing from a land use perspective. And it's also a really positive thing in how best we can have gardens or shrubbery or whatever within the urban context, which actually helps with the heat island and reducing overall heat if they're not just barren grass areas to mow, but actually that could be better planted out with endemic or garden edible garden species.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm very pleased about this proposal that's come to council. I support it fully. One of the issues I've had for a long time is how much open space we mow, slash and use blowers on. I was in the park today with the dog trying to talk to another person with a dog, and the noise from the blower was kind of drowning out what we were trying to say. So we both kind of laughed and went our separate ways. But you know, for a long time, I've hoped that we would turn a corner with the way we look after little parcels of land in the city and add value to them, not just mow them, not just slash them, not just poison them, but to be able to turn them into little pocket parks or to put vegetation on them that suits the locality. And I keep in mind that we do want to provide habitat for birds, insects and microbes within the city, and being able to turn our nature strips into something that's biologically more diverse than just lawn that we mow, slash and potentially blow leaves around is a really good thing. If anyone's interested, have a look online for nature strip gardens and you'll find some really interesting short videos and things. Gardening Australia's got a really lovely video on some of the conversions that's occurred in Melbourne. So do have a look if you get the chance, and you can get some inspiration about how we can convert a lot of these little underloved spaces around the city into something that's really nice. And also the fact that we've been doing this for decades and it's been costing the council literally millions of dollars over years to look after a handful of nature strips when most people look after their own. So I'm really pleased to see this come to council, and hopefully we'll turn a corner really quickly with regard to adding value to some of the little spaces around the city and encouraging people to, look after their nature strips and their little pocket areas, pocket parks around their houses and things. So very good, and I highly recommend we all support this.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you. Look, I share some of the great intentions and of it, because about only 19% of households in Hobart have nature strips. If we are lucky, if we're in a city dwellers like I am, I have no nature strip, but I have access to 3 or 4 well-maintained parks. It seems to me the highly valued parts of the city have their own parks and they don't have nature strips. We're referring to mostly out in the suburbs of Lena Valley and Newtown. And my objection was that we are, whilst we have great ideas of turning out those few nature strips that are out there into oases of green and great insects and birds and native plants and vegetable gardens, in reality is that most of them probably are best off as lawn areas. Essentially, it was part 3 that I was concerned about at committee, and I was the only dissenter, that I thought that we should at least inform and seek feedback from those 19% of our ratepayers who have got nature strips, because really the nature strips are council assets. They're our assets. They're not the landowner who has the property in front of them. They are assets of the city, and we should maintain them. I could see that in changing of people, some people might like to have a vegetable garden in front or a fruit garden, but the next lot of neighbours may not, the next inhabitants may not. So all I can say is, I'm not going to vote against if I'm allowed to have each section voted for. I have no problem with 1, 2, 4 and 5. I have a problem with 3, that we're going to impose this without any possibility of consultation with those who are affected. So I think it's got the hallmarks. It may not be the principal intention, but it's got the hallmarks of a cost saving. And I believe that we should at least have the opportunity for the residents who are affected to give us some feedback, because they may say, no, I'm not interested in turning into an urban forest in front of my house. No, I haven't got the time or energy or even a lawnmower to actually maintain the nature strip that's owned by council in front of me. So I think we should have a consultation before we implement this. That's my concern. So Lord Mayor, would you be able to do 1, 2, 4 and 5 separate from 3? I'd like to vote separately on 3, if that's possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Barakis. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sherlock was first, I think.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Yeah, look, I just wanted to probably just say 2 things and then perhaps offer a solution, because as Alderman Barakis Alderman Briscoe pointed out, he actually was concerned with regards to the consultation. So the 2 things that I did want to say is that, to my understanding, the Greater Hobart Councils actually do this as well. This is something that they do, but Hobart City Council actually for a longer period of time has actually maintained those nature strips. So if we do go along with this, we will actually be doing what is done in Kingborough and Glenorchy and Clarence, to my understanding. Number 2, I think what needs to really be pointed out is that the residents, to my understanding, who side by side the nature strip, they will actually get to decide and choose from a variety of different plants, flora and fauna that they will then asked to maintain. They may even want to put a tree. They may want to use various different plants, and it's something that they actually get to choose. And I think that's really important. And finally, as a solution, quite possibly, to Alderman Briscoe's concerns, is that what we could do is actually endorse this tonight as part of a draft policy. And because within the communication strategy, as was pointed out by the director at the committee meeting, there is a communication strategy already in place. So it will go out, it's a period of like a year, to my understanding. So it will go out and residents will be able to give us feedback. What I'm proposing is if we endorse this tonight, we can wait for the feedback to come back and then approve it finally at the end. That's just a solution to account for what the concerns that Alderman Briscoe has, quite validly, but we can incorporate those as part of our decision-making process. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Brown, that isn't what the motion currently reads, Councillor Sherlock, so you'd need to amend it.
Yeah.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and through you, I've got some questions, just going off what Alderman Briscoe said. So just for the record, who owns the property, or who owns the nature strips? Is it council?
Yeah, I assume you'd like me to answer that.
Sure.
Through you, Lord Mayor, council owns the nature strips.
Okay, so look, like Alderman Briscoe, I am not comfortable with it. And this, yeah, and just to confirm, sorry, this item would seek to place the burden of maintaining and enhancing, which, look, I'm all for the enhancement of nature strips. I think what's being suggested in principle is quite nice, but is this item effectively placing the burden on the enhancement and maintenance of these nature strips to the adjacent property owners?
Mr. Noy.
We've lost him.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm having difficulty with this. Not well, where they are able to do so, Chair. In instances where they may be infirmed or not able to, or it's dangerous to do so, they wouldn't be expected to do so. But like in other jurisdictions and like in some cases within Hobart, the expectations, if you're mowing your lawn on your own property, we would expect you to mow the nature strips where it's safe to do so.
Okay. So, look, my Lord Mayor, my view on this, and I think I'm glad that Alderman Briscoe has asked for this to be moved separately. But I'm not comfortable with us putting the burden on property owners for something which effectively is something that should be covered in their rates. That is why people pay rates. It's the reason why people pay rates. It's for the maintenance of the road. It's for the maintenance of the footpaths and related items, which would include nature strips. So I know we, as a council, like to go on these spending sprees on pet projects, but this is the maintenance of the roads and footpaths and nature strips is a core part of our council business. It's what people pay rates for. We are one of the most highest rated councils in Tasmania. And I think, we need to not, take away the services that people are paying for these exorbitant rates that they're already paying. So look, I'm not comfortable with this as much as I do like the idea of enhancing and enlivening nature strips. I really think that's something that really falls onto council's responsibility. Acknowledging that other councils are doing this, it's not something that I personally agree with or can in good conscience support.
Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just for clarification, may I ask two questions? The question number one is, I understand from what I'm hearing that the nature strip is owned by the council. And if it is owned by the council, then why do we expect the owners to do this work? It's like if I own the land, which is mine, I don't expect the council to come and mow my land.
Mr. Noy.
Yeah, look, it's an expectation that's enforced, I suppose, in other jurisdictions. People are mowing their lawns immediately adjacent to these properties, and people do mow their lawn, mow their nature strips. So they keep them to the standard that they expect, and also they at times would like to plant them out and add to the amenity of the street. So it's putting in place, I suppose, a policy position, and there is a cost associated with this, as highlighted. There is a considerable cost to all ratepayers who don't necessarily enjoy having a nature strip outside their front or council mowing that adjacent nature strip.
Just a follow-up question, Lord Mayor, please. So if this is an expectation and not a policy, or is it a policy? I just have difficulty grasping the difference between expectation and policy. If it's a policy, then okay, I take a different perspective. But if it is expectation, which is a norm, then it's a different thing. I see it from a different perspective. Just clarification, please. Is it a policy?
It's a policy position, Chair.
Thank you. And the other question that I have, again, raised by Alderman Briscoe, with regards to consultation, and there was a suggestion made by Councillor Sherlock. Is that possible to incorporate that so that we make sure that there is that consultation and we don't get a repercussion of other times when we haven't consulted well?
Through you, Chair, most definitely would be happy to include that within section 3, and to report back to committee and council on that consultation.
Thank you. And before any final decision is made, is that what we're leading to?
If that's the wish of the council, then we would be happy to implement that.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, we've got a few hands up. I'm not sure who's Are these questions? Because if they are, Deputy Lord Mayor's question is first. Or have you spoken, Deputy Lord
Yeah,
Mayor?
sorry, my hand shouldn't be up. My
Okay.
apologies.
Councillor Harvey, have you got a question?
I have, Lord Mayor. Just to clarify, could we just hear the percentages again? We subsidise a small amount of nature strips to the tune of $400,000. Is that accurate?
Statement. Yeah, Mr. Noy.
Right. The overall program is 400,000. The mowing of nature strips adjacent to residential properties is in the order of $270,000. There are 19% of properties within the municipal area that have a nature strip adjacent to their properties. Of those, 16.9% don't mow their lawns currently. 2.1% do.
So we're subsidising that 16% who don't mow their lawns.
Okay.
So I don't think that's a good outcome. Most people do it. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Harvey, if you can't ask, it's just a question. So, Councillor, I think Alderman Briscoe's next.
Thank you, Chair. Question through you, Chair, to Mr. Noy. Is there any legal obligation for any resident who has a nature strip in front of them to maintain that nature strip? Is there any legal obligation, and can we enforce it if there was? And I've got another question after that.
As is the through you, Chair, as is the case in other jurisdictions, no, there isn't a legal obligation.
Right. The second question is, if the council is maintaining its asset, is that subsidising an adjacent landowner?
Through you, Chair, I wouldn't necessarily use those words.
Good, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I just might ask a similar question to Alderman Briscoe, perhaps a bit more specifically. Under what's being proposed, if it was to be implemented, if a property owner failed to maintain the nature strip outside their place, would they be held financially responsible in any way?
Mr. Noy.
Through you, Chair, no, they wouldn't.
Okay, so we've got some suggestions of amendments. I'm just wondering whether someone would like to actually do that so we can move on with this. So there seems as though there's a proposal potentially to put the word "and consultation" after the words "community engagement" and in 3. Is that what someone, is that in, so who'd like to move that? Who'd like to move that amendment? Alderman Barakis.
I'll move it. Yeah, I'll move it, I think.
Oh, okay. Alderman Barakis or Councillor Sherlock? Councillor Sherlock's moved it. Is it seconded by anyone? Did you move the item, that Alderman Briscoe? I think you moved the item. Councillor Dutta, seconded by Councillor Dutta. Okay, so is there any discussion on the addition of "and consultation" strategy? Okay, I'll see if there's any discussion.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I was just unmuting. So the expectation will be that if I don't want to do it, then I won't, and the council will continue mowing my lawn when we're encouraging people to maintain their own lawns, because that's the standard throughout the whole country, as I understand, and Hobart's probably one of the last places on earth that goes around mowing all the nature strips, because it's what we've historically done, and we have a group here at the table now who want to continue this historical practice. So I just don't understand when we get accused of wasting money, and here's an opportunity to save money by encouraging people to take responsibility and engage with their nature strips, and it's being fought. It's quite surprising. Anyway, so I don't think we need to add that extra word, so I'll vote against that particular amendment.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, we do like to save money when it's at the ratepayer's expense. We never like to look inwardly at how we can save money. But I'll just need to correct something that Councillor Harvey said. We just heard that these nature strips are council property. We're not asking people to mow their own lawns. We're asking them to mow our lawns effectively. So I'll leave that there. I'll be supporting the amendment for greater consultation. I think council can always improve the way that we consult with the community, and if the community thinks this is a wonderful idea on the whole, then it would be expected then, Councillor Harvey, that they would support this overwhelmingly.
Councillor Dutta.
Lord Mayor, I'm just wanting to move that we defer this matter because I haven't got a good hold of the whole issues and the facts. And I wasn't present, so
okay,
I'm
that's
just
a
moving.
procedural motion, so I'll have to put that without discussion.
Second, you need a seconder.
Seconder, who's going to move the second? No, I think you've already might have seconded something, Alderman Barakis. I think you just seconded Councillor Sherlock's amendment. I'd need to seek advice on that.
No, I didn't second anything. If my hand was up, it was to speak.
Mr. Jackson, can you tell me who's seconded?
Through you, Lord Mayor, the amendment was moved by Councillor Sherlock and seconded by Councillor Dutta.
Okay, so I don't think Councillor Dutta, you can move the deferral.
Okay. Thank you.
So who else? And then who moved the original motion?
I did actually.
No, I moved the original motion. I removed the original
Sorry,
motion.
I'll ask Mr. Jackson who's recorded.
Well, I'm the chairman. I moved the motion.
Okay, Mr. Jackson.
The original motion was moved by Alderman Briscoe and seconded by the Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we've got all those people have moved motions. So if there's anyone else that wants to move a motion,
or
otherwise
second
we'll
motion.
just continue with debate.
Lord Mayor, I'm happy to move the motion for deferral in Councillor Dutta's place.
Okay, I need a seconder for the deferral. Councillor Coates?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. All right. No, it's a procedural motion, so I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
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 Oh, sorry. I'm going to just do a show because it's a bit hard. Deputy Lord Mayor?
No.
Alderman Zuko? Oh, he's not here. Alderman Briscoe?
Yes.
Alderman Sexton?
Yeah, aye.
Deferral? Is it? Alderman Thomas?
No.
Councillor Harvey?
No.
Alderman Barakis?
Yes.
Councillor Dutta?
Yes.
Councillor Fox is gone. Councillor Sherlock?
No, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Coates?
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote against. Mr. Jackson, what was the result?
That's tied, Lord Mayor, 5 votes each, so the motion is lost.
Okay. So let's continue with debate. We've got we're on the amendment only. So I've got Alderman Briscoe's hand up.
Thank you, Chair. It's good that the amendment was moved. I tried to move that in committee and it was defeated. But obviously, Councillor Sherlock has thought about it, and it's good that she is now supporting it. And I think consultation is the way, even if it comes back that is against the policy. At least we've done it and we may have to make a strong decision. But I think the policy overall is good. But I still think that we have to have an opportunity for the people who are affected. And what we're really asking people is that they look after council's assets. They have to look after council's assets, irrespective of those surrounding suburban councils that traditionally they've never been able to afford a service like this. But I think we've got to, when you take away a service, you've got to give some opportunity for people to give you some feedback. It is a budget, as I said earlier, I think it's a budgetary consideration. It's got nothing to do with providing more urban forests or whatever, because even now, a person who wishes to have a garden on their nature strip can approach council and get permission. I know a couple of people in the Glebe have done it, and in Newtown as well. They can do it now. So by taking away a service, potentially taking away a service, maintaining council assets in front of people's properties. We've got to give the people, the residents out there, an opportunity to be consulted. And I appreciate that Councillor Sherlock has moved this amendment.
Okay. So any further, we've got Alderman Thomas, and Alderman Thomas, this is just on the amendment to add the word "and consult."
Yes. Hold on.
Okay.
Yes, Lord Mayor. I'd just like perhaps to ask you or the Chief Executive, when would a targeted community engagement strategy and comprehensive communication plan not include community consultation? This seems to be. Can you just explain to me when a developed community engagement strategy and comprehensive communication plan wouldn't include consultation? We're voting on an amendment to include the word consultation.
Okay, it's got to be just a quick question, Alderman Thomas. So
well,
I think we've got that.
Not even contributed to the debate yet. I just want to see if I'm actually listening correctly.
Sure.
This is the consultation.
CEO, have you got an answer to that question, please?
Lord Mayor, that's correct. It's implicit.
Of course.
Okay.
Can we get rid of that because it's getting late again?
Yeah.
So I mean, we've got to be targeted. We're talking about a major community engagement strategy and a comprehensive communication plan. So please, can we vote against this amendment, please?
Okay, so we have no more discussion on the amendment, which is to add the word "and consultation" in 3. All those, well, I'll just do a quick whip around the room. In favour of adding that word as an amendment, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Against.
Alderman Briscoe.
For.
Alderman Sexton.
Against.
Alderman Thomas.
Against.
Alderman Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Alderman Barakis.
For.
Councillor Dutta.
For.
Councillor Fox.
There.
Councillor Sherlock.
For.
Councillor Coates.
Against.
And I was going to vote for. That's probably gonna, what's the result? Sorry, Mr. Jackson.
Through you, Lord Mayor, tied vote, Lord, 5 votes for, so the motion's lost, or the amendment's lost. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So now we'll go back to the substantive motion, which is not. There's no amendment in it. Is there any further discussion on the substantive motion? People who haven't spoken already on the substantive motion? Councillor Coates.
Look, yeah, just very quickly. I guess being a mainlander myself, you know, I think I know there's going to be a level of concern and worry, but I think in the main people do their civic duty. And look, I know it's anecdotal, but we had a very wet spring last year, and you know, I know a lot of people whose allergies just went nuts. And sometimes I feel like people are used to just waiting around because the council will come and do it. And look, hopefully this will have a slight change in behaviour, and as a city, we'll get a better outcome. I also have some comfort in knowing that if we do make a mistake tonight, this is something that we can sort of revert back to what it was previously. And I think we should be unafraid as a council of making changes to these policies, and ultimately doing the work. And, you know, after next spring, in a year's time, you know, the officers will be able to, and the feedback we'll receive from residents, ultimately we'll know if it's successful or not. It may be, it may not be, but, you know, I think I'm reasonably comfortable with the proposal that's before me at the moment, in the knowledge that I don't think we're going to do sort of irreparable harm, and potentially some good. So look, I hear very much the concerns that Alderman Briscoe raised, but I think that ultimately what we have in front of us is a step forward, not a step back. But even if we do dip our toe in the water, so to speak, we can take it back out if we find the water's too hot. Cheers.
Okay, any further discussion? There's no further discussion. I've just got 2 quick questions, if I can. The nature strip policy, which was an attachment, Is that where the details are about that age or infirm residents can apply for the lawns to continue to be mowed? Is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah, because it's not actually mentioned in the item specifically, but I presume it's in the policy.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay. And can I just clarify that this, as far as you know, are we the only council in the state that is doing, providing this, service to a small proportion of ratepayers and charging all ratepayers to provide that service?
Chair, I might refer that to Mr. Fisher. That is my understanding.
Through you, Chair, that's our understanding, and I think Devonport are going through a similar process to seek people's comments on taking on board nature strips and turning them into planted perennial gardens as well.
Okay, and from your research, Mr. Fisher, is there a council in the country that is doing this?
I've spent a lot of time working around the country, but it wasn't one of my high profile things to look at. Look, I think the comments made by Alderman Coates is quite correct. It's seen as a public service. It's seen as a community duty. And I think in my experience, in the areas that I've worked in, it is generally accepted that mowing a nature strip is part of the process of maintaining the appearance of the property. And that seems to be the general feel for the community in this country.
Right, and just one little final question, because it was just raised as that we'd never look inwardly to cut costs. So can I just confirm with the CEO, did we, as a result of the pandemic impacts, cut about $6 million internally to our operations organisationally and internally?
Through you, Lord Mayor, that is my understanding based on a previous council resolution in the 12 months prior to my arrival.
Okay, thank you. All right, so on the request of Alderman Briscoe, I think you would like me to just do each one separately, is that correct?
Look, you could just treat three separately and the rest
separately.
has a
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries.
Appreciate that.
I'm going to put items 1, 2, 4 and 5 and just test whether there's any dissent on those. Alderman Brackus, voting against that.
Yep.
So that's Alderman Brackus against, everyone else in favour. And item 3, all those in favour. Oh, sorry, I might do a quick whip round. In favour of item 3, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
No.
Alderman Sexton.
For.
Alderman Thomas.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Alderman Baracus.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
Against.
Councillor Fox. Oh, not here, sorry. Councillor Sherlock.
Against, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Coates.
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote for. Okay, so Mr. Jackson, was that passed?
It's carried, Lord Mayor, 6 votes to 4.
Okie doke.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, can I hear that vote again? It was carried what?
So I think the most of the motion, 1, 2, 3 and 4 was voted for unanimously.
No, Alderman Baracus was against.
Alderman Baracus, I'm sorry. Yeah, Alderman Baracus against 1, 2, 4 and 5. And for item 3, it was 6 votes in favour and 4 against.
Lord Mayor, should we not, through you to the CEO, should we not now vote on the substantive motion, please?
That is the substantive motion.
Yeah. We just did.
It's just on the it's just
so we haven't just voted separately for all of these items.
No, we voted separately for item 3
only.
Okay.
Okay.
Know what you're doing.
All right. It's getting.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I was going to make a request. Seeing some of us have been here since 4:15 and not had a break. Any chance of a short break?
I think everyone would like that to be fairly quick, so maybe
Yeah, quick.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
5-minute quick comfort break.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Leave your stay on, but just turn your video off.
You didn't want to vote on that break separately?
Sorry, I didn't mean to ask you to unmute.
It's okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, we haven't quite got a quorum just yet. I think we do now. Okay, so item 13, would someone like to move that?
Sorry, Lord Mayor, my Zoom's not letting me open my video. It's saying that the host accepted it.
That seems strange. Did you change your setting at all?
I didn't even turn the video off when I left, so it's not letting me turn it back on. I promise you I'm here.
That's me. I'll fix it.
Okay. So item 13, moved by, there you are. Moved by Councillor Sherlock, seconded by Alderman Baracus. Receive and note. All those in any dissent to that? No dissent. That's carried unanimously. We move on to item 16. Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. So would you like to speak to this? Anyone? Anyone want to speak to the submission?
Lord Mayor, I wonder if you just give me a moment because I've just lost my agenda, so I've just got to go through. I'd like
so this is the draft City of Hobart submission.
Yes, I know.
Councillor Dutton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was wondering if we can include a few other points in there, or should I move it as an amendment to it?
So why don't you, I think we can probably, if the mover and the seconder are happy to, given it's a sort of input into a submission, it might be okay. Let's test. Sorry, who was the mover and seconder? Just remind myself. Councillor Sherlock and, was it? Councillor Sherlock and
There's Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillor Sherlock,
okay.
Lord Mayor.
All right, so Councillor Dutton, yes.
Thank you. The other point, or two, in fact, that I would suggest that we include is that the council support term limits being introduced for elected members. That's one. And number two, that any amalgamation proposed ought to be accompanied by an elector poll to gauge community feedback and a significant financial investment made in the state government budget to facilitate the significant additional cost of merging multiple organizations or councils.
Okay, so there are two suggestions to add into the submission. Are the mover and seconder happy to incorporate those in?
Well, Lord Mayor, I think they should be amendments.
Amendments, okay, sure.
Yeah, they're so significant.
All right, so I need a seconder for Councillor Dutton's amendments. Councillor Harvey.
No, I'm not amending. I'm just putting up my hand to talk.
Okay. Is there a seconder for Councillor Dutton's amendments? No. Okay. So we've got a substantive motion. Who'd like to speak on that? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, look, I was going to speak against the amendment because I would like some qualified advice or at least some explanatory notes on any additions to these. So I'm quite comfortable with those points that have been made so far. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation. I have no problems whatsoever, and I can't think of any other additions I would like to make, and I wouldn't make any without having some sort of qualified advice.
Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'll be supporting this. I think especially the issues of compulsory voting, the issue of caretaker provisions, I think is just common sense. But I do have a question. I just want to make sure that my interpretation of Part 5 is correct, because I think it relates to something that's been a bugbear of mine on this council. Just the reading of that paragraph about the role of councils in policy, would that suggest that this is providing a more, a definition or a with, like, as it says, a set of overarching governance principles that are more in line with modern local government, but then would also at the same time place some set of boundaries that at the same time do reflect the more modern level of government that's grown beyond roads, rates and rubbish.
CEO?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The intent there is indeed correct, Alderman Barakis. It's really about recognising that as a more contemporary local government sector is involved in a range of policy deliberations and in fact works, in an important role within our local government context within the state and federal remits as well. Obviously, there are a number of acts that also include the role of local government, like the Planning and Environment Act, for instance. So it really is just recognising that. And any matters of policy for council to consider, you'll note there's also a section on integrated planning, and that really relates to where council, might set about a particular course in regards to policy, that it does so in a way that's underpinned by evidence, and that's part of, a sort of an annual program that council would in fact adopt. So there is that sort of recognition that it forms part of that integrated planning role of a council that's evidence-based, and that includes community engagement at its core as well.
Thank you. So just a follow-up to that then, does that then also place boundaries upon that more modern definition of council responsibilities? Or is it sort of open to whatever council thinks is important at any given time?
I think the intent there, and remembering, Lord Mayor, through you, Alderman Barakis, this is a phase 1 submission, so it's reasonably generic in nature. It really is about recognising that local government ought to have a much broader role than just roads, rates and rubbish, but that of course needs to be informed by an evidence-based, planning approach, which does of course include community engagement and understanding of, policy issues of the day. And I think I've said there in the submission, the draft submission, that housing would be one such example.
Thank you. Just quickly, Lord Mayor. On that part and part 5, I'll be supporting this in its entirety tonight. I just would reflect that, yes, I think all of us agree that council has evolved from the old days of just being roads, rates and rubbish. I think that's pretty clear. At the same, and the scope of council has evolved beyond that. At the same time, I don't think the scope of council has evolved into infinity. I think there does need to be some restrictions on the scope of councils. I don't know. I wouldn't try to proclaim them right now. I think it's something that would need to be worked out properly. But for instance, I wouldn't say us getting into the conversation of nuclear disarmament is something that's a good use of council time, perhaps. As much as that might, go outside the typical roads, rates and rubbish, I think that might go a little bit too far outside of that. But granted, we do need to move with the times, and we do need to be a contemporary council. I think we just need to do it in a way that's smart and responsible as per our responsibilities to our ratepayers. But I'll be supporting this, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Sherlock.
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Look, I really do want to commend this report and the work that's been done on it. I too will be supporting this tonight. I did want to just make one comment with regards to what I was really impressed about, which was the detail and the thought behind what has been written in this report regarding the code of conduct. And I think it's been outlined really well during a time where there's an increased number of vexatious applications that have been put towards different elected members, with an increased level of scrutiny with regards to how much we are spending, ratepayers' money we are spending. Those codes of conduct that have come into question have really also cost us as a council as well. So I think the suggestions with regards to the code of conduct are really warmly welcomed from me. So thank you very much for that, and I'll most certainly be supporting it tonight. And I do also support what Alderman Barakis was saying, and what the CEO also canvassed as well. We have to move with the times. We're evolving, and I do believe as well that we're not in that old traditional view of council being all about roads, rates and rubbish. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for those comments. Councillor Sherlock, although most of our budget is spent on roads, rubbish and footpaths and so on. Look, I do commend the CEO for this report, and I too will support it. The only thing is that I know it's fashionable to, in this day of age to have a, if you make an allegation, it's true. And for example, in the code process 121, it says currently every breach, it's really an alleged breach. And we do have fairness in this country still, rather than just saying, oh, the breach, it's got to be an alleged breach. I think there might be a couple of other I think you always have to say alleged, because as the Councillor Sherlock said, there's at least been one vexatious, well, no, it's been described by an outsider as vexatious, like the Code of Conduct panels, it didn't class it as vexatious, but I still think we've got to be fair and say alleged breach. I'm hoping that we can, before the election, that we, what do we call that period of time before an election, where, caretaker mode, that this council has a policy before this council election in October that we do go into caretaker mode, because it makes it easier for the officers to know where they stand, and we delegate some of the functions that we do, which we can, to the officers. So we may not be able to delegate all the functions, but I think in an election period, it puts the, and I've observed this in a long period of time during election period, the officers are caught between, is the elected member just doing this for publicity, using the council role to get publicity to get re-elected? And I still think, and I believe, perhaps I could ask a question to the CEO, through you, Chair, to the CEO, that Clarence have got a caretaker policy for their elections. I think, I wonder if you could confirm that in your belief.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I can confirm that there are a number of councils that have introduced just this year, in fact, caretaker provisions, some leading into this round of council elections. I certainly know Kingborough has. I'm not sure about Clarence, to be honest, but there are at least another 3 or 4 councils within certainly southern Tasmania that have gone down that path some months ago now, though it's fair to say.
So it would be possible, there is time to bring before council such a policy for endorsement. I'm sure. I'll leave it in your hands through you, Chair, to the CEO. I suppose in reform, I suppose the most significant one which the government is going to introduce legislation is compulsory voting. And I know ever since I've been on council, the councils had the policy decision to support compulsory voting, and I think it puts us, as someone pointed out, I think it might have been a letter to the editor, it puts us on the same level of legitimacy as a democratic organisation as the other spheres of government, the state and federal. So I look forward to that, and with a bit of luck, it will get through the Legislative Council. Apparently, it's been tried before and it's been stopped at Legislative Council level, because I think whilst it probably won't change too much the representation of around the table, I still think it gives us more legitimacy more than anything else. Thank you.
Further discussion, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a few questions that I have. A question with regards to compulsory voting. Do we take into account students, residents, or is this only for citizens?
Thank you.
In the submission, what's in the submission?
Yes.
So, Lord Mayor, my understanding is that it relates to those who will be on the electoral roll. The general manager's role is another matter, as I understand it, and that's something that will be discussed as part of the discussion around the legislation that's being introduced into the Parliament for discussion.
So just a follow-up question then. So those who are on the manager's role, it'll be debated before a decision is taken as to they can vote or not.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'd need to seek advice specifically on that in regards to the general managers or the electoral poll. I'm just not clear how that works in this jurisdiction, but the intention of compulsory voting is that all those eligible for voting, in accordance with what happens in other jurisdictions across the country, would be enrolled to vote and therefore would. That's my understanding of the legislation. But Mr. Jackson might like to clarify. I'm just not that familiar with the role itself.
But through you, Lord Mayor, the legislation that's been introduced into Parliament makes compulsory voting for people who are on the House of Assembly roll. So only those that are on the House of Assembly roll would be mandated to vote. As far as the general manager role is concerned, the current provisions would remain. So it would be a voluntary, a voluntary exercise for people who wished to get themselves onto the general manager's role would be entitled to vote. So nothing changes with respect to their entitlement, but it just wouldn't be compulsory for people who are on the general manager's role.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Okay, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just might offer an additional clarification to Councillor Dudda's point. I think it actually is a clarification, not a personal explanation. I think that any changes to the general manager's role will be handled as part of the broader local government reforms that are going to happen later on. This is just the compulsory voting itself. I don't think it affects the general manager's role. But that I don't think that's to say that won't be touched. I think it's just not part of this round. It'll be done as part of the comprehensive reforms, is my understanding.
Yeah. Further discussion? Okay, I might just make a few comments. I think it's important to clarify that we are speaking about putting a submission to the board. This is not a submission on current legislation. This is a submission to the board who's starting their thinking about the local government review. There will be no doubt other opportunities to have input, and I probably would like to add other things, but I don't think this forum is probably the right place to do it because it's more of a workshop. So maybe it's something that we can talk about in our next round, because I have noticed a couple of practices in a couple of other states that I think are worth us pulling out more specifically. But again, we just don't have the time to sort of go into them. I do want to just pick up on something Councillor Harvey mentioned about wanting staff advice. I appreciate that, but this is very much this is a legislation for us as councils, and we have to kind of in some ways make some judgment calls about what we think is good practice for the management of our decision-making bodies. This isn't planning advice. This is about us sort of looking at how we think local government works, and we're the experts in it in a way because we're the local councillors.
Well, Mayor, I think I said qualified advice, not staff advice.
Yeah, I guess so.
Which means anyone.
If I can just make my own points on this, it's just really to say that I think we are the qualified people. We are the councillors, and we should really understand our own sector and have ambitions and a view about how we want to design our own sector. And in that sense, this is the first step, but there will be, I'm sure, lots of other opportunities to have input into this local government reform process. This is just the first phase. So if there's no further discussion, I'll see if there's any dissent to endorsing the submission as it stands. Any dissent? Okay.
Lord Mayor,
Yes,
I'm assuming that that breach it gets changed to alleged breaches.
I think that's a small one.
I know,
but
but
do an amendment.
Yeah, it's not an amendment, but we've got an understanding that those things will be corrected before we vote. Yeah.
Yes.
Lord Mayor, I'm happy to amend the language accordingly.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. So is there any dissent to passing that submission? There's no dissent. That's passed unanimously. That brings to an end our open council agenda, and I am going to ask someone to move. Deputy Lord Mayor, we move into the closed, seconded by Alderman Barakis. Any dissent to moving into the closed?